Welcome to the AUA News Inside Track podcast, an official podcast of the American Urological Association. Thanks for listening. For more episodes of this podcast, visit www.auanet.org/podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the AUA News Inside Track Training Transformed podcast, where we discuss unique educational initiatives at residency programs across the country. Today, we are joined by Dr. Britney Honda, a PGY5 resident, and Dr. Abhinav Khanna, a urologic oncologist, both joining us from Mayo Clinic, Rochester. Dr. Honda and Dr. Khanna, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and briefly introduce this video review project that we'll be hearing about today.
My name is Abhinav Khanna, and I'm a urologist at Mayo on staff, specializing in urologic oncology, robotic surgery. I'll let Britney introduce herself, and then I can give a little bit of an intro to what we'll be talking about today.
Hi, my name is Britney Honda. I'm one of the PGY5 chief residents here at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Khanna on his rotation.
So I think, thank you for having us. I think we're both really excited to be here and talk about this. I guess the topic that we're talking about today is sort of the way we've integrated surgical video into our residency training program, and how we've incorporated sort of reviewing video and using video as a teaching tool, which is not something we often think of. But I would say, we'll get into the weeds of all this stuff, but the framework right now is that essentially we have a tool that captures all of our surgical videos for any surgery that we do that involves a camera. So in urology, that's laparoscopy, robotics, endoscopy, basically everything except open surgery. Those videos are all automatically captured routinely. There's an opt-out, but we don't have to opt in. And so those videos get pushed to a cloud-based server where there's actually a third-party company that serves the purpose here of sort of digesting all those videos and kind of running them through their own AI algorithms, and sort of structuring these videos for us. And so that I think has a lot of applications, but the one we're talking about mostly today is its applications in formal and informal resident education.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. What was the initial motivation behind starting this program? Was it mostly just to capture videos? Was it initially for educational purposes? How did this all start?
Yeah, good question. So I can probably give you a little bit of the background. So, I don't think video review is unique to our program. Certainly, this is something that happens in some shape or form, probably across most programs in the country. And I also don't think it's unique to urology, right? So any procedural field that generates video probably strives to use that video in a meaningful way for education. And certainly, like back before we had this platform, we were doing a lot of that sort of like most other people, which is, grab the video off of a USB drive that you plug into the robot tower, or go to like a centralized storage server, like what we had in my residency, where all the videos get pushed to a server. You bring your external hard drive and you download the videos and you sort of go watch them. But it was, I think, and that's probably been the status quo for a long time at many programs. And I think there's two problems with that is, that we saw. So one was that it's kind of asynchronous, right? So everyone kind of does it in a silo. When I was a resident or even a fellow here at Mayo, I would go grab my videos and just kind of watch them on my own time. And it was a very independent activity. The second is that the process, there's a lot of friction in that process, right? So like if I forget my hard drive at home, or I don't have my thumb drive on me, or it's full, and I forget to grab the video and I go back and maybe it's not on the tower anymore, or maybe it got deleted or whatever. And so we in I'd say like 2021, early 2022, had an opportunity to explore the use of a technology that at the time was very new, and really there was nobody we had heard of that was really using this type of technology. So we partnered with a startup called Theater, which was, again, at the time, really the only player in this space, and still is probably out in front of most of the other folks that are doing this type of work. But it was an opportunity for us to really start to catalog our videos in a systematic way. So instead of a resident or even an attending having to go grab a video physically off of a robot tower or from a hard drive or something like that, there was an opportunity to shift all of that into the cloud and kind of modernize our video storage system. And then not just video storage. I think what theater allowed us to do was really start to structure those videos using their sort of AI tools that they had available to us. So it kind of unlocked video to allow us to scale it in a way that we probably didn't have before that.
With this theater program, who's responsible for inputting and saving the information? Are there people in the operating room that have to learn how to do it, or are all of your video systems automatically integrated and everything automatically gets downloaded?
Great question. It's actually the latter. So when we first started out, there was a little bit of manual input, but I'd say the last 3 to 4 years, it's been completely automated. So like Brittany has no idea how to send a video to theater, and nor do I, and nor do any of our nurses, which is excellent, right? Like that was probably the biggest challenge to overcome, was that sort of manual input to say, hey, we need to route this video to such and such place. Now it's gotten to the point where we're actually fully integrated. So every time a scope puts a video on the screen for anybody in the OR to see, that video is getting captured, which is actually really nice.
Does it also document any patient information or just the date and time of the procedure? Does it document the type of procedure you're doing?
Yeah, it actually captures all that. So it has the patient's information. Obviously the things that we need to know, like what room the case was in, who was involved, all that stuff. But we send kind of behind the scenes. There's metadata that goes into this cloud server, so it's linked to the medical record number, which is actually then on the back end linked to sort of the chart in the EMR.
Very cool. Who has access to it besides residents and attendings?
I think that's it for now, right? So folks who participate in videos, and Brittany, you can correct me if I'm wrong, folks who participate in a case can see that case in almost like de-identified, like you'll know whose case it was, I believe. But then we've actually opened it up so that, like Brittany can see all the cases that are happening in the department, even if she's not participating, they're just anonymized.
So there's no responsibility on your part to capture the video. What's the responsibility, or is it mostly just based on your own personal interest in terms of residents being involved in reviewing and annotating any of these videos and attendings being involved in that process as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Brittany can speak probably a little bit more to like what the culture has evolved into. But I think in some ways this kind of took on a life of its own from an educational standpoint. So when we first rolled this out, we started to say, okay, let's think about ways to formalize this and build it into the training curriculum, and even build in like feedback, using standardized feedback tools for surgery and things like that. And what we found pretty quickly was if you forced people to use a certain instrument, like the uptake was so, but actually very organically, the residents and the fellows started to use this more and more on their own. And it sort of turned into like a little bit of a town square for our program, where we actually formally looked at this about 2 years ago with Grant Henning, who was one of our fellows at the time, and he wrote this up. But basically, the residents started to not just view their videos, but they started to view other people's videos. They started to view videos before a case to prep, after a case to debrief, and then started tagging each other and sharing videos across the platform. And I'm sure Brittany can speak more to kind of what that looks like today.
Yeah, it's been a really great thing. I agree that it's kind of happened organically. When it was first introduced to us, we um, had some trials and errors of how we wanted to best utilize it. And we had a couple formal sessions where we all got together and worked with the company to figure out how it worked. And then we had a couple senior residents or fellows who kind of led the way for us, and led video reviews in a formal, non-formal type setting where they would just invite folks over and say, hey, let's review prostatectomy today. Whoever wants to come And then we would say, hey, like the seniors want to look at the bladder neck dissection and the juniors want to go over SV dissection. And then we would all just focus on different parts of the cases. But it's nice because whoever is pulling that up on a computer for the group can annotate throughout it. They can tag whoever was at the session so that we can easily find that video again. And I would say more recently, it has become not like a social media thing, but almost in that way where, for example, if we're switching services where we're going to work with a new surgeon, someone will come up to me and say, hey, can you tag me in a couple great videos that Dr. Khanna did for SP and XI prostate? And I'll be like, yeah, sure. And then you tag them and they can pull that up. They can watch the video before their case and then feel like they're prepared or know Dr. Khanna's techniques for the parts that they are planning on doing. So it's been really great from that aspect, as well as a lot of us kind of create our own repositories where you can categorize the videos. And I like to categorize them by case type and consultant or attending type. So I'll have like Dr. Khanna partial nephrectomy, and I'll have like 10 of them. So if I need to look back, I can really easily find the ones I want to see. And then if I annotated them well up front, then I'll know exactly what parts he did, what parts I did. And it's useful to be able to go back and see how I've progressed or to work on a certain part of the case.
Once you end up leaving Mayo, are you able to keep all of those videos that you were a part of and take them with you?
That's a great question. So Brittany may not know the answer to this because she hasn't left Mayo yet, but she will very soon. And I would say this has been something that we've been trying to work through. So Theater, the company that we work with, they've been fantastic about sort of structuring this however we like. And they've I guess tried to work with us to allow folks to keep access. The challenge for us, and I think each institution that they've partnered with has structured this a little bit differently, but for us, those videos remain sort of property of the Mayo Clinic. And so, our institution has said, those videos are for our users, and our users mean people that are currently actively part of our program and have an active like email.edu email address at our institution. And so the transition off into a different sort of post-training world where they're no longer part of our institution, our organization has said, those videos are not going to follow those folks out. Now there are ways to, download like totally de-identified, anonymized videos and some stuff like that. But yeah, it longitudinally does not follow our trainees after training at this point. Which is good for Brittany to know too, as she's thinking about transitioning to practice in the next month.
Figuring out what things you need to download and save before you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you mentioned that there's now an AI aspect to, I believe, annotating the videos. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, I wish I could just show you. Actually, it's probably easier to see. But basically, the bulk of the cases we do in urology, especially like robotic type cases, are supported by the platform to where as the video feed is hitting the cloud, there's sort of AI algorithms that are watching it in real time and labeling each step that's happening, sort of in real time. And so at the end of the case, you can pull up your phone or go to your, tablet or computer and pull up the video that you just did the case for, and it's actually already annotated. So there's a timeline, and it shows you like, okay, for example, for a prostatectomy, like here's when we did the anterior bladder neck, here's the posterior bladder neck, here's the anastomosis or the lymph node dissection or whatnot. And so from a training standpoint, I mean, there's again lots of applications for that type of annotation tool well beyond the scope of what we're talking about today and well beyond sort of education. But from an educational standpoint, I think it's helpful because it allows the residents to hone in. Like if they're after the case, if they're like, hey, I was really struggling with that anastomosis, I couldn't get my angles right, or hey, the like posterior bladder neck looked really funny, and we wanted to review that. Like they can just hone in by clicking that part of the case. And I think also what it allows you to do is if you're preparing for a case, or let's say you're on a rotation where you're doing lots of a specific type of surgery over and over, and there's parts that you're sort of working through, you can actually like search. You can query the platform and search for like, hey, show me show me people cutting out a tumor in a kidney, like the actual excision part of a partial nephrectomy, and if that's what that trainee is starting to focus on for that part of that rotation. And you can just click through those steps specifically. So rather than watching a 2-hour video start to finish, you just watch a bunch of tumors get cut out over and over and over the night before you're going to go maybe cut out a tumor the next day. So I think it just facilitates probably making the whole process of prepping before and reviewing after a lot more efficient, I would say.
Is that something that's always been incorporated in the program or something that you had to teach and include in it?
Yeah, it's a good question. We started off when we first started working with this company, they had really, really strong algorithms in other domains. So like hepatobiliary surgery and foregut surgery and general surgery and gynecology and all that stuff. And they were a little less far along in terms of their urology stuff, but I think now there's like, I don't think there's any need or want left from a urology standpoint. I think most of our cases are pretty well structured, so it's not like the residents are having to, or anybody on our side is having to actually do anything to generate these annotations, which is honestly the beauty of this whole process, I think.
Dr. Honda, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like this was introduced while you were in residency there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What was the overall resident attitude towards this experience as it was being introduced?
Yeah, it was an exciting time for me as I was transitioning from being a junior resident to more of a senior resident, and therefore getting to do more robotic cases where I find this platform more useful as compared to maybe endoscopic cases, with the exception of maybe like hole ups or something that you really need a lot of reps to learn. I think that compared to the prior way of getting video, which was our attending had to like invite us or share the link to this kind of archaic video hub, and then we would have to watch it on that specific website. And there was no way to annotate or download it, and it was a little bit clunky. I think we're pretty excited to have this newer way where you can just open your phone at the end of the case and throw in a couple comments and be done. So especially in, I think, like our era of residency where we're very attuned to technology and we like to have kind of that instant gratification of having it at your fingertips on every device. So I think the buy-in was pretty great. There was an initial thought of, maybe we should comment on every case that we've ever done and then have the attending give us feedback, and that ended up feeling like forced. So I don't think a lot of people adopted that. But I think organically, as we review our videos and whatnot, and if I just send a comment to Dr. Khanna saying, hey, what do you think about this part that I did? And then he can just respond on his own time. It's been really nice. And I think that a lot of us have started to use it more in that way. And it's been really great for training.
Dr. Khanna, from an attending point of view, how involved do attendings tend to be in this process? And what kind of things have you learned about training residents from this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the answer to that probably has evolved over time. So when we first started adopting this and we first started sending videos, I was a fresh faculty, like right out of training, and I was super involved in the process. Like I was constantly, getting on there, giving feedback, either synchronously or asynchronously. So a lot of what Brittany's describing, like a lot of just hop on there, put comments on, tag the trainee and say, hey, this is this part of the case. This is what I would have done differently, or here's how I'm seeing the anatomy, or like, this is just a reminder, this is what we talked through, or that sort of thing. And so I was kind of living and breathing in the platform. And then I'd say over time, as it became more and more ingrained very naturally into the day-to-day workflow for the residents, I have found that I've honestly just naturally started to do that less and less because the residents are already kind of doing it a little bit more and more on their own. So I'd say the faculty engagement has sort of shifted over time. I think there's still some faculty that are still pretty engaged. I think most of us try to be pretty responsive again if people are going to put comments in or tag us or whatever. I think it also depends. It also depends on the sort of types of cases that are being done and the level of the trainee or the experience that the trainee has with that type of a case. And so I will say from the faculty perspective, it feels like probably most of the residents are coming through maybe with a little more prep under their belt. They seem to be like, oh yeah, I was, this technique, like I'll be showing it to them maybe for the first time, but it's not maybe not the first time they've seen it, and vice versa. Like they'll see it and then come back another day that week to do the same case, and I find that the learning curve is probably a little steeper, and maybe we just have better residents than we used to, and certainly Brittany is attempts me to that. But I think that the learning curve is actually enhanced with this type of a thing, because no longer are residents just gonna like pay attention during the case and then kind of put it out of their mind until the next time they set foot in the OR. I can tell that people are actually putting in time outside of the OR, which is probably the most effective way to learn. When you have a short amount of time to learn a new skill like this.
Do you feel like this method of video review and annotating is applicable to all residents despite different learning styles?
I think so. I think I think probably if you step back and think about the way we teach surgery, like we bring someone in the operating room with us, we're operating on a real life patient, right? Where the outcomes are paramount. And we sort of say, okay, like do this part of the case with me, if it's an open case or if it's a robotic case, sit down and do this part of the case. And that is a high stress environment, right? And it's probably not the most conducive to like long-term learning. I mean, it works, and most of us all sort of learned how to do surgery that way. But I think if you augment that high stress learning environment with a somewhat lower stress learning environment, like, hey, let's go, look at some video from the case we did last week, or hey, why don't you go look at this part of the case on your own and kind of think about what you would want to do differently, and then we'll regroup. Like adding that low stress part of the educational sort of process, I think again, I think it enhances the learning curve, and I think the residents honestly are better for it.
That makes total sense because you're exactly right. When you're getting hands-on in the robot, you're pretty much stressed the entire time about the whole case going on. So it's very nice to have that, to be able to low stress kind of focus in on what the techniques you're learning and be able to then translate that into skills in the operating room.
It also is hard in the moment to perfectly, like, to always articulate exactly what it is that the feedback that you're trying to give in real time in a way that's actionable, right? So it's sometimes you're like, well, we don't have the time. Like we're moving through a case, and we don't have the time right now to say, hey, like this is why the way you're setting this up doesn't look right, or this is why this is kind of not the perfect plane. And sometimes it's hard to deliver that in a way that's effective in that context. It's also hard to receive it too. And so if you can sort of capture that and then revisit it in a lower stress environment, I think it allows us as educators also to say, hey, let's look back at this, this one thing and see where we got off plane and how we can correct it. And I think it's also easier to receive that feedback too outside of that low stress environment. So I think it goes both ways.
Definitely. And nice to be able to revisit it a couple times to say, okay, this is where I made that mistake or went a little bit off. This is how I can prevent doing that in the future. Is there any objective way that you guys have identified that you're able to correlate the amount of time and investment in video review to surgical competency and actually seeing that play out in the operating room?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have explored this a little bit, but it's a hard thing to pin down. Um, I'd say the formal answer is no. I don't think we can tell you like these residents have spent X amount of time looking at video, and this is kind of their room for wizard. It becomes a little bit harder to quantify. But what I will say is we've seen adoption kind of skyrocket. So early on, When this first happened, when this first came, there was like a few sort of folks that were dabbling in this, and then those people kind of became like your super users. Um, and I think now it's really transformed into something that's ubiquitous throughout the residency. And so again, we looked at this. Grant Henning did a really nice job of summarizing this, but it was like, we quantified a lot of different things, but one of the things we looked at was like how much time are people actually spending on the platform and how are they using it, right? And so this was probably back in 2023, so we only had the platform at that point maybe 2 years. But already like I think over 70 or 75% of folks were logging in to look at videos to prep before a case, and they were doing that more than half the time. And then in terms of how often were people logging in to view video after a case, kind of like to debrief, like 95% of people were doing that more than half the time. So what that says is, I mean, to me, that means this has actually gotten ingrained into people's workflows. Like they're often, at least at the time, they're telling us that they're using this to prep. They're using it to sort of debrief afterwards. And so it extends that sort of life cycle of the surgery from not just being this isolated event during the OR experience, but also before and after for the vast majority of people. Um, and then again, I know this is not exactly what you're asking, but we also tried to quantify like what is the nature of the work that they're doing or the nature of the prep. And it actually is interesting. I mean, it differs by trainee level, right? So more junior level residents obviously are focused on different parts of the case. So like for instance, prostatectomy, the junior level residents are obviously they're spending most of their time looking at, dropping the bladder or the seminal vesicle dissection or something like that. Whereas somebody at Brittany's stage who's, nearly done with training is focusing on very different parts of the case. So you see those cluster, but even more interestingly, the nature of like the comments that they're putting in are a little different, right? So the juniors are maybe a little bit more like technical focused, like, oh, this is how you set up your arms when you want to drop a bladder, right? Whereas for most senior residents, they're doing a little bit of that, but they're also doing a lot more of like, hey, there was aberrant anatomy on this case, or hey, there was, this was a salvage case, or hey, this is something technique that is unique or maybe not run of the mill and something I want to like tag and revisit and come back to, or they're saying, hey, these are parts of these cases that I actually did, and like they're almost creating this little self narrative or commentary, like I did this, and then I maybe lost a little efficiency during this part, and then so and so stepped on, or the faculty helped me get back on track, and they're sort of annotating that on there so that they can then reference back to it. And that was really interesting to see, which is kind of the junior and the senior residents are using the platform pretty uniformly, but the way they're using it is actually different.
Are there any other future studies that you're anticipating revolving around this video review theater? And where do you see this project going next?
Good question. I mean, we're doing lots of, I think, interesting work outside of the education arena. In terms of within the education realm, I think we're always looking for ways to continue to formalize this. So, one of the things that has happened, I think, in the last year or so is that, part of our didactic education curriculum, it's like a once a week review some topic. It's very like, I think most programs probably have something like this, but it's kind of our like core curriculum type review or content review. And periodically now one of those is dedicated to video for a particular case. So every couple of months, I think one of the faculty or even the fellows will come give a talk that's entirely video based, right? So it's technical rather than knowledge based, which again, knowledge base is paramount for what we do, but technical expertise is also really important, and so we're paying homage to that. I think there's also probably some interest in maybe revisiting the idea of like, okay, can we actually start to quantify and maybe more rigorously look at people and how they prep and how that correlates to maybe how they climb the learning curve during particular rotations. So I think lots more to be done in that arena. I'd say we're still really early in our experience with this and in this space.
Definitely. It sounds like just in the 4 or 5 years that you've had it, you guys have made great use of it and come a long way. So I'm sure there's lots of interesting things that you can find from it in the future. If another institution was interested in creating something or using the same feeder program, where would they start? Is that something that you and Mayo Clinic were approached by the company? Is that something that a company that other institutions could reach out to? How would they begin to do something like this?
Yeah. So I would say we're not the only program that uses this type of platform. So theater is integrated, I think, in a number of different programs across the country. We are, theater is not a Mayo entity; it's its own entity, and they approached us early on, and we sort of heard about it, and we're really intrigued by a lot of the possibilities for education and beyond. And I think that any program that's out there and thinks they want to incorporate something like this, especially from an educational standpoint, I think Barstool is a no-brainer. But to them, they would probably just reach out to the company directly. And I think the process is pretty seamless for getting integrated for OR video feeds going into the cloud and stuff like that. But yeah, it would just be directly through the company.
Do you have any info on how much the program setup and maintenance costs specifically through the theater?
Oh, good question. Thankfully, I do not. So we have a department chair who's been super supportive of this, and I think our department leadership has really seen the value of this type of thing. Again, really, I think from an educational standpoint, but potentially even beyond that, and they've been supportive of allowing us to integrate all of our ORs, robotic, laparoscopic, and endoscopic into this. I don't know the cost, but whatever it is, I think it's well worth it. At least if you ask, educators and learners.
Were there any major mistakes or errors that you guys noticed or made along the way learning how to use this platform, setting it up, or anything that you would kind of caution others about starting a process like this?
Um, I'm curious what Brittany would say from a trainee standpoint. I would say one of the pitfalls early on was that we initially set this up to be an opt-in, and videos had to get sort of manually pushed by somebody in the OR or something like that. That was probably a mistake in the sense that anytime you force people to have human input in a process, it always gets forgotten, right? So I remember even like being fresh out of training and wanting to grab videos off the platform, and I forgot to press the button in the OR that day, and I didn't have the video, and it was frustrating. I had to go into our own internal video server, which was, again, like Brittany mentioned, not the most user friendly at the time. And so we switched that after realizing that was maybe not the best way to set it up. But I'd say that was probably from a like infrastructure and programmatic standpoint, that's probably the biggest mistake we made, was not making it automated off the get-go. And we realized that, and we sort of fixed that, and the company was really responsive to just allowing us to integrate this into the workflow so that every video gets sent automatically. So that's a solved problem. But I'm curious, Brittany, if you had things that you wish you had known. Uh, what if I mean, you've used the platform a bunch, about to graduate. Like, what would you go back and tell the PGY2 or PGY3 Brittany who's just sort of getting her feet wet?
Um, I think that maybe I wasn't one of the like super early adopters as far as one of the super users when we first got it. I was a little bit more um I guess cautious as far as, how am I going to do this? I wanted to see how everyone else was using it. And I think I didn't realize that you just use it however you want to. No one's really watching how you're doing it, and there's no right way to do that. So once I let go of that, I think it became a lot more useful. And I just had my own system of doing things, which is probably not how other people do things. Um, Something that I started doing later, which I don't know if it's good or bad, is I started doing a lot more private comments, which I felt was also more liberating, of being able to just put in like 100 comments in a video of exactly step by step, what am I doing with my left hand? What am I doing with my fourth arm? And not feeling like other people are going to read those and, um, you know, form opinions on what I was doing on the platform. So I think just like not thinking of it as like Facebook, where someone's gonna look at your Facebook wall and see all of your activity, when I realized, like, I'm just gonna do things the way I want, no one cares, everyone's using this in their own way. I think that was just very liberating, and I think it helped a lot with my progression, from an educational standpoint and also just using the platform to its fullest potential.
Do you think that spending more time reviewing these videos and kind of looking back at cases that you were in and preparing for cases coming up in this way specifically impacted your other like studying and ways of preparing for things for residency?
Um, that's a good question. I think it really just supplemented it, and I think it's become a seamless part of the way that I study for things. Because it's so accessible, I think it's been um, easy to just log in on my phone when I'm walking around the hospital on rounds or something and just like do a couple things that will help me in the long run. Um, and I don't think it's impacted me negatively in any way. Like I don't think it's taken up time that I would have spent doing other things. I really think it's just been an enhancement as far as um, filling the space of how do I progress surgically outside of the OR, which I think is traditionally very difficult. And maybe a lot of us relied on like YouTube videos or like reading Hinmans, but there's only so much you can do to really hone in on some of these skills without being in the operating room. So I think it's been really great for us. And um, to be able to actually tailor how we're learning the cases to whoever we're actually working with has been really nice rather than watching like generic video. We can say, I want to watch Dr. Khanna's SP partial nephrectomy today so I can prepare for the case tomorrow. And I think that's a very unique aspect that I think only helps both us and our faculty.
Absolutely. It sounds like this has been a major asset for education through your program. What key takeaways should residents and faculty members who are listening to this podcast each take away from this?
I can give my perspective, and then I think Brittany, I'd love to hear what you have to say to trainees and even the faculty. But I would say, from my perspective, the biggest takeaway is that, you know, training doesn't have to necessarily only be limited to the way it used to be. And I think that, as technology advances, I think we would do a disservice to our trainees and honestly their future patients to not embrace technology and really like technological advancements that have come around in the last few years. And so I would say, the way we think about training, I would say ought not to be identical to the way we were trained simply because technology has come so far. And so, my message would be embrace video and embrace the technology to use video as a teaching tool however you can, whether it's with theater or any other platform. But I would say this should really, in my opinion, be integral and integrated into every training program in some way, shape, or form, because I think it makes trainees learn faster, learn better, and makes our jobs as educators probably a little more streamlined too.
Yeah, I think my main takeaway is as someone who's graduating from this program and will be going into practice where I will no longer have access like this to my videos. I am just trying to make the most of what I have now for my education because I think it's a phenomenal tool for lifelong learning and for young faculty just to get better at the cases that they're doing. Um, and it's funny how much we have just relied on this to pop up on our phone or our computer. And in the rare instance where it doesn't get recorded for whatever reason, I'm just like devastated because I'm like, oh my gosh, this was a great video and now we don't have it. And it's just funny in those instances to see how much we um, just take for granted that this just automatically uploads and is accessible even during the case. We have live video or, right after the case, it's already uploaded. So there's no lag time. I think that as I'm looking forward, I'm just very sad that I'll be losing access to this. And I think that it's been a great part of my training. And I'm very, very grateful that it was brought to the program during my time here.
Well, thank you very much. From someone coming from one of those archaic programs where we have to bring our hard drive and download every video, and if someone forgets to hit record or we put the patient information in incorrectly, we have no access to everything. So it definitely sounds like this is a really neat opportunity that you guys have for education and personal growth, particularly in surgery, which is what we're all here to become experts at. So I think that's awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. Are there any other points that you guys wanted to discuss?
No, I would just say thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you both for joining us for another episode of AUA News Inside Tract Training Transform podcast.
This has been an AUA News Inside Track podcast, brought to you by the Residents and Fellows Committee. For more information about the AUA and AUA membership, visit auanet.org/membership.